Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore. Today we have Jim Olson with us. I've known Jim for quite a long time, and I've always been impressed with the kind of person that he is. You definitely would know Jim as a gentleman. So I asked him to be on the podcast, and he graciously said yes. Jim are you the president of the Utah Jazz?
That's correct.
Is that the official title now?
Yeah, as far as titles go, that's the one they gave me.
I mean, Dad's a cooler title, but...
Much cooler. I'll take that any day of the week.
That's right. So to give us some context, Jim, tell us a little bit about your role there and with all the other sports things that you're involved with. Give us a little insight into your career, and then we'll jump into family.
Great. Well, thank you. It's great to be with you today. Cory, as you mentioned, we've known each other a long time. I've been with the Jazz for 28 years now. Really started at an entry-level position. Worked my way up kind of through the ticket sales and marketing, and then had the opportunity to work in other departments. And the sports entertainment group, makes up the Jazz and the Arena and the Salt Lake Bees. And back when we were owned by the Millers, we had movie theaters and we had a racetrack at one point. So I've really kind of had a wide, broad experience in all sports entertainment. And then about a year and a half ago, I was named president of the Utah Jazz. And, I really focus on the business side, and we have Dennis Lindsay and Justin Zanuck who focus on the basketball side. And then we work really closely they work to put a good team on the court so we can make some money, and we work to make money so that they can pay players. And it's a great organization, and it's been a lot of fun.
Congratulations on your year this year so far.
Oh, I'll tell you what, it's been a year, especially with COVID and everything we've had to deal with there. But, we feel like we've let out in the NBA in a lot of areas, getting fans back into the games. And obviously the team has performed on the court, and it's been a great year, and we're excited for the playoffs to start.
Super cool. Yeah. Super cool. Jim, would you tell us a little bit about your family makeup? I mean, it's pretty cool to have the president of the Utah Jazz on the podcast, but like Cory said, the title of father is probably something that you take most seriously in your life. So tell us about your family, tell us about your kids, and some of your background, maybe growing up, if it's applicable.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, no question. Being a father and a husband is by far the greatest thing in my life, and the thing that I take most pride in. And very fortunate. I met a wonderful young woman at the University of Utah when we were going to college, and my wife's name is Susie. Susie came from Colorado to go to school at the University of Utah. I think she jokes sometimes that I had to marry someone outside of Utah because none of the girls in Utah were going to be willing to marry me. But I was fortunate to find a wife to be as most of us admit, we married way up, and Susie fits that role and has played a huge role in helping me grow up and learn how to be a husband and a father. And we've just had a wonderful life together. We have 4 children. They're all pretty much grown up now. Our oldest daughter, Maddie, she's married to Christian, and we have our first grandchild. He just turned.
Congrats.
Yeah. Just turned 1 about a year ago. And it's been absolutely amazing to become grandparents. And so Maddie and Christian live here in town and are starting their family, and it's a really exciting time. And then I have a son, John. John just moved out to just outside of San Francisco to take on a new job. He graduated from college and is working in the healthcare industry. And I've hated having him move away, but I'm watching the experience that he's having growing up and learning some of the new things, moving away from home. And I'm really proud of him. And then my next son is Abe. Abe's a senior at the University of Utah and studying business, and really on track to, graduate in about a year, and he's gaining some good work experience. Kind of in your field, Cory, he's working for a local developer as a, kind of part-time internship, and who knows, he may find his way into the business like you, Cory. But and then my youngest daughter, Lily, she's also a senior at the University of Utah, and she wants to go to PA school, be a physician's assistant. And all of my kids have way overachieved what I what they would have had I been the sole one responsible for it, but their mother kept them in line, and they're doing great things, and I'm just so proud of my children.
Well, you can tell sitting across from Jim, like as he speaks of his children, he just glows. His eyes smile as he says his kids' names. Like you can really tell you've got a lot of respect and are really proud of your kids.
I really am, and I'm sure we're going to get into it and talk about it, but you wonder as a father, especially when they're young, this world is tough. It is a tough world, and how are they going to grow up and find their way through these challenges? I worried a lot about it as a father, and now to see them, graduating from school and getting jobs and raising a child and moving on, moving outside and really venturing out. It's so exciting and really fulfilling.
Very cool.
I may ask you kind of a general question, Jim. Hopefully that's okay.
Absolutely.
So in a lot of ways, whatever you did has been working, right? And I'm not that I'm sure weren't bumps along the road and all that kind of stuff like everyone has. But if you were to look back on raising your kids and now they're kind of going out on their own and you're obviously very proud, what kind of things would you say worked or didn't work? If you had keys to success, if you were going to tell your younger self, let's say, hey, this is going to work, this isn't going to work so well. You give me some thoughts on that for for listeners.
Yeah, it's a great question. And unfortunately, I think I learned more what doesn't work through experience, but I'll start with a few things that I do feel like worked. Susie and I, from the very get-go, decided we wanted to have a close family. And you can't just say we want to be a close family. You have to put things behind it. You have to decide early on that you're going to be engaged with your children, but also expect your children to be engaged with you. There might be things. I loved my daughter Lily, and she was a pianist. I didn't love going to piano recitals. You joke, you kind of like it's a 2-hour piano recital to hear your child play for 3 minutes, but you got to listen to the other 2 hours. But you go because you want to support your child in that, and you make it a big deal. But at the same time, your children have to participate in things you want them to participate in. They may not want to. They may want to go hang out with their friends on Friday night, but we're going to be together as a family tonight. And so you kind of develop that two-way street where I'm going to invest in you, but even though you're just the children have to invest back into the family. And we wouldn't word it that way. I never told, you have to invest back. We just made it clear that family is number one. Family is most important. And family is, I would say on a very regular basis, family is first. And once again, that doesn't mean that there aren't times that they can blow off the family to go do their thing, but family is first. And I think that emphasis on family being first has, number one, kept us very close, and number two, created opportunities for us to support each other and help us grow together, learn from mistakes. You mentioned, you learn from your mistakes. My personality is a little A-type. And sometimes that's not the best personality for raising children. There were times when I realized my personality was telling them how they should do things. And, that worked for one of my sons because his personality accepted that. But it didn't work for another of my son. My other son, he had to learn it his own way. He had to figure it out his own way. And that was hard for me. And once again, because you love your children, you're concerned about them, you want them to take the easiest path. But sometimes you got to let them feel those bumps and bruises and learn from that themselves. And I definitely felt like I had the vision for them. And you do this, you do this, you do this, and you do this, and life's going to be a lot easier. Well, that doesn't work. And it was hard as a parent to accept the fact that even though you saw that next step your child had to make, they had to make that decision on their own. And sometimes you have to stand back and let them do that.
It's been a common recurring theme,
Sure.
and so there's got to be a lot of wisdom in that, that setting that, the expectations and then letting them kind of become their own person, regardless of how good you think. So it's come up in a lot of podcasts so far. and
You can do it, Kirk.
Very,
I have
very
faith in you.
valuable. There would have had to have been some conversation or culture specific conversation about this is what we do as a family, as the Olson family. This is who we are. This is what we do. Where you get pushback from especially teenagers when friends become more important than family in their minds, at least temporarily.
Yeah.
Do you ever remember having a conversation with your kids or a sit down where some of those things were talked about as expectations of what we do as an Olson family, or a mantra that you guys live by?
My daughters were really good at going to my son's baseball games or, some other sporting events. And for whatever reason, they go to a football game or go to a baseball game. And all of a sudden my daughters would have a soccer game and, the boys had no interest. There's no way they were going to support that. And, you sit them down and you say, hey, John, Maddie was at your baseball game last week. And, how much would it mean to her if all of a sudden you showed up? And I don't know, it sounds like you're pointing out the obvious, but you mentioned it, when they're teenagers, they were great kids, but teenagers are focused on themselves. And I think it's just pointing out what we think is so simple, but helping them see that, there's more to their growing up than just themselves. And to that point, now that they're young adults, it's so cool to see how they're engaged with each other and how interested they are in each other's lives. And so, just helping them understand that there's more to life than what they see at that moment. And then, giving them a little nudge and push along the way to help them get there.
So, Jim, I noticed earlier you were talking about your wife. I could tell that relationship means a lot, and she's brought a lot to the table that's made you who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so fortunate. As I mentioned, I'm kind of A-type, and, to me, things are always very clear in my eyes. I remember years ago, Susie's an artist, and she sees things in all different colors and all different angles and all different shades. And she would say to me years ago, Jim, not everything's black and white. And at first I would say, yes, it is. There's right, there's wrong, there's yes, there's no, and how wrong I was. And I think, an example that I kind of referenced a minute ago is how I learned a little bit late how I was raising one child was not how I should raise the other child. There are 4 completely different personalities. And, Susie helped me realize that. She caught on very early strengths and weaknesses in each child and how she could adapt and how she could learn to relate and how she could create expectations based on who they are as individuals. Where me, it was always 1 + 1 = 2. You take this step, you take that step, and it leads to this, and then you go here. And Susie balanced that out. So, I'm the one that always sees everything very clear cut, and she's the one that sees things in colors and shades and different levels, and she helped balance that out. There's so much to be said for these children learning who they are. If a young man is going to really be a gentleman, he's going to be a gentleman because he understands who he is and his role as a gentleman, and not because I told him that's who you need to be. And, sometimes my approach was, well, this is who you need to be, where Susie's approach was helping him understand who he was as an individual and how that could help bless or help affect other people's lives for the positive.
Would you go back in time with us a little bit and talk to us about somebody who was influential in your life in teaching you some of the things that you've now taught your own kids?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no question that my father was most influential in how I, taught my kids. The thing that's really interesting about that is there's a lot of hindsight to that. And what I mean is I used a lot of things that I learned from my father in raising my kids, but I actually didn't realize I was doing it till later. And it's really become apparent, my father actually passed away just about a year ago. And so I've had the last year, I think of him every day. But now I'm like, I did do that because of my father. I'm not sure when my kid was 8, 9, 10, 15 years old, I was thinking, oh, this is how my dad did it. But looking back on it, I can absolutely see that my father influenced absolutely how I built relationships with my children. I was probably a little stronger in my approach initially. He was a little bit more patient. That's one of these hindsight, boy, I wish I would have been a little more patient at times and a little bit more understanding at times. But I think the one quality I learned from my father always expressed confidence in us as children growing up. And I hope, looking back on it, that my kids realized I always had confidence in them to be great and to succeed and to be kind and to grow up as good people in society.
Give us a little bit of some how on that. I think that's something that we haven't talked a lot about in the podcast, and is an important part of a parent's role, is instilling confidence.
Yeah.
Not that you don't sometimes tell them when they're off the rail.
Yeah.
But I need to do a better job of that at my house, is instilling confidence.
Yeah, I'm going to combine two stories, and I'll make them quick, but I'm going to combine two stories that kind of tie into that. One is the mistake, and one is learning from that mistake. And so both my boys were good high school baseball players, and they were very passionate about their baseball. And the first one, the older one, you learn on the older ones and then, get to benefit on the younger ones. But so John, it was after a baseball game once, and he was a really good baseball player, but he didn't have a particularly good game. And we're driving home after the game. I learned later in life, he didn't like the car rides home after the game. And he said, yeah, I used to try to tell mom, can I ride home with you instead of dad? And not, but after the game, I'm like, hey, John, at this one at bat, you did this. Did you think about maybe you should have swung at this pitch and not swing at this pitch? And then on this play in the field. And I went through this 5-7 minute recap of his baseball game. And he looked over at me, and I don't know, he's probably 14, 15 years old. Looked over after, and I brought up this and this and this and this. And he said, Dad, does it really matter? And, I felt about 2 inches tall, right? I was like, okay, my 14-year-old son is putting into perspective what really matters. And I swallowed a little bit and I said, no, it doesn't. Thank you. And, he just got done with a baseball game. He didn't need his dad, critiquing or recap. He knew what he did wrong in the game. He knew what he did good in the game. And maybe, and I was like, it hit me so hard. So now years later, my next son, Abe, and he'd had a terrible game, and he was a good ball player too, but he had a terrible game, and he came home, and I had learned I wasn't going to recap the game. And he came home and he was just beside himself. He said, I am just a terrible baseball player. And I said, think about what you just said. You said, I am a terrible baseball player. I said, I want you to think about that differently. You're not a terrible baseball player. You played a terrible game, but you are a man. You are a person. Define who you are as a person. Don't let baseball define who you are. And not trying to say, I handled it great, because it took me, handling it really bad with John to learn that lesson. But I needed Abe to understand baseball was not who he was as a person. Okay, so you had a bad baseball game. So for those 2 hours, you were a bad baseball player. So what? Because in the rest of your life, you're a great person. You're a leader. You're a friend. You're a good example to others. Abe is my kid that looks to do service. We've come out of our house in the wintertime, and he had a truck, and he was the one who always carried, ropes in his truck so he could pull people out of the snow and help people out of fixes. And that's who you are. You're not a baseball player. You're a great young man that's looking to do good in life. So, okay, so you had a bad baseball game. That's okay. And so it was John telling me, hey, Dad, does it really matter? And then when it happened to Abe, I could help him identify who he was, not as a baseball player.
So many lessons in that.
There are.
And if your kids play sports, the time right after the game, they are so susceptible to any type of feedback. And if the feedback is negative, then they feel negative.
Yep.
If the feedback is positive and reaffirming and reassuring that you did your very best, and you've got a couple things to work on, but I'm proud of you, they are so much more open during that car ride home. I've heard of this, and studies done on this, that during that car ride home, they are open to teaching.
Yep. Yeah.
And they will remember that time for the rest of their lives.
No question. They'll turn off the negativity. right? They'll just turn it off, and they'll turn you off. And like I said, they'll look to drive home with mom instead of dad because mom's going to love them and stop and buy them a cheeseburger and a Slurpee and have a great time. But to your point, you give them the positive. I tell Abe not to identify himself as a baseball player, but they're teenagers and they're still going to identify themselves. So make it positive, make them feel good.
Men and women do that as adults.
Yes.
A lot of times you take a job away from a person and they don't have an identity anymore. And for a kid in high school playing baseball, that's who you are. That is your identity. So you take that away, they don't really know who they are yet. They're still trying to figure that out. Yep. So there's a lot of wisdom in the lesson, though, that you learned what not to do on the first one. The second one benefited from it. And there's, to anybody who's listening, who's maybe not done that right, or is in that position where they've learned something, try it on the next kid, or go back and apologize. Like, how powerful is that if you go back and say, you know what, that time I've been thinking about this, that time that I critiqued you, I probably shouldn't have, and I'm sorry. That's probably going to stick in their mind just as much as the critique did. If you bring it back up and apologize, like, be the bigger person and say, this is something that I've felt strongly about, and I want to make it right with you.
Apologizing to your children, and once again, like everything else I learned way too late in life, but apologizing to your children is one of the most powerful things. You're the adult. You're the one that should have all the experience, should have the answers, should know how to handle situations. And when you go and sincerely apologize to a child and ask them, for forgiveness and ask them, how can you make it better or make it up to them? It creates a bond and a trust with a parent that is powerful. So obviously you don't just go apologize just for that sake, but you do it because it's the right thing to do. And you're trying to teach your children, you do things for the right reason. But I have learned that humbling myself and telling an 18-year-old child that he or she knew something better than I did, and I apologize, it's created a bond, help that bond be tighter with my kids.
So Jim, you're running quite the organization, and I can't help but ask, you have a lot of what I would consider young men as basketball players. And then you have a lot of employees that are young. Yep. Is there advice for that generation? Is there advice for young men? My mind wants to get in your head about what kind of advice would you give to these young men in the NBA?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I am so fortunate, for the vast majority of my career, we were owned by the Miller family. And from Larry Miller to Gail Miller, there was always a mantra of doing good. That phrase is used constantly in the workplace, that we have a responsibility to do good. We do work in a business that is very recognizable. And so because of that, we have that responsibility to do good. We have a new owner in Ryan Smith who brought that same mantra. He's given a full ride 4-year scholarship for every win that the Jazz have this year. And, these are, to underprivileged children that, may not have the opportunity to go to college. And so, I really focus on, we can go to work and if that means going onto the court and checking the boxes of what you have to do at practice, or showing up in the office and working in the marketing department or the sales department, you can go and check the boxes. I got my work done today. But where it really has meaning to you as an individual, to individuals that you will reach, that you will connect with, and to a community as a whole, when you have a focus on doing good and looking to utilize your job, your responsibilities beyond checking the boxes, that's when it makes a difference. That's when you go home at night, feeling really, really good about yourself and knowing that it's bigger than you. No matter what we do in life, if it's family, if it's a job, if it's a religion, if it's whatever we engage with, if we realize whatever it is bigger than us as individuals, and we have an opportunity to give back and help make it even bigger than us, then that's when we really find that satisfaction and that happiness and peace in life, that we're doing something more than just checking boxes.
That is fantastic advice. Being engaged in something bigger than ourselves and not being selfless is ultimately where true happiness comes from, and usually where great things happen.
And, I mean, that's really what being a parent is. I mean, for however many years the first formative years of life are, everything you're doing is for your children. Everything. From providing a roof over their heads to food on the table, to clothes to wear. And then you take it opportunities for education, opportunities to play sports, opportunities to work. We always emphasize, our kids always had jobs, and it could have been mowing lawns or babysitting until you could go get real jobs. But everything you do as a parent needs to be selfless. It needs to be about your child. And sometimes that's hard because, your kids don't always know how to thank you for it. They don't know any better. They just think that's what you should be doing as a parent. And, but if you can adapt or take that same approach, me going to work every day is not about me going to work. It's going to work for the employees, to give the employees chances to grow, chances to learn, chances to advance in their careers, chances to have experiences that they can share with others. And so that's where I find the most happiness in my job is adapting what you do as a parent and helping your children grow and experience to the workplace and your other employees.
There's kind of like a line that you cross too, because you grow up as a myopic teenager and then you become a dad. And from that point forward, you're right, things start to become more about others and less about you. And those who are successful parents embrace that. And they realize that life is bigger than me now. So how has being a father impacted you as a person?
It has absolutely humbled me to my knees because, we joke, but I think we joked because if we didn't joke about it in my family, it would hurt too much. But like, I wasn't a good dad in the first year or two. It's not that I was a bad dad, but that 6-month-old baby, they have nothing to give you back,
right?
And so it's like, hey, Susie, Maddie's crying, and it's like, I was still in that phase that I didn't realize it, but the hindsight that, well, I wasn't getting anything out of it. So why am I going to go change the diaper? And not to say I didn't change diapers, but I didn't do it with love and excitement. And this is awesome. And I love being a dad to a 6-month-old. And then I realized all of a sudden when they could go out and toss the ball around or kick the ball around, then all of a sudden I loved it. But the point, my point, to your question is that it has humbled me to be a father. One, because I realized it didn't come naturally and easy at first. I had to learn and grow into it. And two, because when you do understand that responsibility of that child growing up and hopefully becoming, I would say this to my kids, and I wish maybe I would have found a better way to say it, but the importance of being productive in society, giving to society, not taking from society. And I would talk to my kids about that quite a bit, I feel. And when I understood that responsibility and how important it was to me that my children were growing up to be productive in society, it has humbled me because it's hard. It's hard for the children, and it's hard for the parents, and finding that there's not one way. There are right and wrong ways per se, but it's been so humbling to be a parent and understand that responsibility.
I remember an experience real quick. When my oldest was born, I was in the same exact position, and I was looking at this little baby and thinking, wow, I'm sure glad that Karen's here and that she knows what she's doing, because I have no idea. And it hadn't really changed me, like the responsibility part of being a dad, because you're not interacting with it. You're not teaching yet. It's just tasks at that point. And I remember one day, she was just exhausted, and she looked at me and she said, Kirk, I need more help. And I'll never forget that, because I was like, oh, well, what can I do? You know, I was thinking about it as like tasks that, well, she's a stay-at-home mom. That's what you do. And I didn't want to encroach upon the territory, but she was honest enough with me to look at me and say, I need more help. I'm drowning here, because I'm a first-time parent too, right? And so from that point forward, it became my job to do certain things. And then one of those things that she said, I need you to take this off my plate, was bath time. So I gave my kids baths. And so every night she would look at me and she'd say, it's bath time. And that was my job. And that came from just that very small conversation of her saying, Kirk, I need more help. So if you need something from somebody, I don't think that it's that they're not willing to. It's that they might not know how to, or that it's the right place for them. Give everybody a break, because it's the first time. If you're a first time parent, there is something that changes in you, but it doesn't happen overnight. There's a learning curve.
I had to learn that, by maybe a little bit of the straightforward, direct, I need help. And we had our 4 kids in just over 5.5 years. And I will tell you, I look back on it now, me going to work, and just like everyone else, I work long hours, we work weekends, we work holidays, we work evenings, being in the business that we're in. I'll tell you, a 12-hour day at work for me was cake compared to what Susie was dealing with at home with 4 young children, and I'll tell you, the women in our lives are superheroes for what they do.
I was going to ask you about the work-life balance thing, because I know how big of a job you've had and had for some time. And I think we all evolve over time. Certainly our roles change too, and that helps. But talk to me about, what did you learn along the way? What worked, what didn't work about being able to, give everything you had to give at work and be engaged at home?
Yeah, like you said, it evolves, because early on I didn't have work-life balance. It was all work. Even though I say it was all work, fortunately, there were things in our lives that helped me really engage with the kids. We're a ski family, and we are a religious family, and Sunday is for our religion. But a very, very close second to Sundays being for religion is Saturdays in the winter are for skiing. And, we weren't a boating family, and I have friends that say, oh, there's nothing like having your family out on a boat. And so but that's how it was for me with the kids on the chairlift. And every Saturday morning, we're going skiing. And, there were mornings where the kids, oh, Dad, I want to sleep in. We're going skiing. And that was to the very first. There's a little give and take with both sides of the equation. But now as adults, we still, every Saturday, our family's skiing together. It sounds really good to say you're going to have work-life balance. There are times when you can do that in your life, but there are times when you can't. Work is demanding. But when you aren't at work, find those things. I look at those Saturdays skiing with my family, and like I said, as much as our religion is important to us in our family, boy, I'll tell you, those Saturday ski days have played just as important role of us being a close family, being together, the relationships we have. I mean, now it's Saturday morning it's Friday night, and the kids, these are 26-year-old kids saying, hey, what time are we leaving for skiing in the morning? And I'm like, yes, that's great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There is certainly times and seasons, right? But this consistency, and we've heard this on other podcasts, this consistency of traditions a bit, right? Whether that's going to church or whether that's going skiing or both in your case. Is there any other traditions or things that you feel like your family did that kept you close or together?
Yeah, very, very fortunate. And, you asked about, what I learned from a mentor, and I mentioned my father. As young kids, we took a week every year and would go down to the beach down in Southern California. And my family now vacations at the exact spot I did as a kid. And we know we've got that one week. And every year people say, what do you do down there? And the answer is nothing. We sit on the beach. Well, don't you get bored? And yeah, and that's really awesome, because now we're talking to each other. and we're, playing little games on the beach, or we're going and jumping in the water together. And it is a week. And, I understand not everyone has opportunities for vacations or whatever. And we do other little vacations throughout the year, but that beach trip each year where there's nothing else. And you sit there, you sleep, you read a book, you talk, you laugh, you like I said, jump in the water, swim, play games. And I will tell you, those times just sitting on the beach as a family, and, no one wants to go in at the night as the sun is going down, and it's calm and it's quiet and it's peaceful, or the early morning strolls on the beach and having the kids be there. It very, very special. And it's special because, like I said, I grew up doing it with my parents and my siblings, and now we're doing it with our siblings, and it's a special time each year.
If there was one thing that you could say, if I could wave a magic wand and my kids would embody this one thing that I could have given them as their dad, what would that quality be?
You are asking a question that I literally think about multiple times a day. This is how important this is to me. And it's probably because, not probably, but it's definitely because I didn't emphasize this enough until later in life. And that is to be kind. And fortunately, once again, because of my children's mother, they are all very, very kind children. But I wish they would have seen that as a higher priority in me and my life. I'm sure I've been unkind. I know I've been unkind, but not that I'm a terribly unkind person. But if I could look back and go back, I would want my kids seeing me being a kind person every minute of the day, every time I turn the corner, every time I engage with someone, every time I have an opportunity to show it extra kindness to people. We live in such a divisive world right now. I have not found the answers to, is this right over here or is this right over here? But what answer I have found is that kindness brings that divisiveness closer together. We can disagree on politics. We can disagree on how to even raise children or religion, or we can disagree on things across the board. But when you're kind to each other, it brings you so much closer. And I didn't, like I said, I don't think I was unkind. I know I was unkind at times, but I wasn't an unkind person. But I would wish my kids would look back and say, oh, my dad was always kind to people. He always went out of his way to show kindness and look out for the underdog and look out for the person in need. Look out for the person that maybe hadn't had kindness shown them. And so I think about that all the time. And now I'm trying to make up for it.
That's cool. I do remember when I wrote that in my son's Gentleman Project book for the first time. A gentleman is kind, and he looks out for people who can't look out for themselves and finds the underdog and supports them. So I'm right there with you. I think that that's a very great quality of a gentleman.
I have to jump in here and give kudos to Jim, because he and his wife are those people. My wife and I have talked about you guys behind your backs, and it's always, aren't they so nice? Aren't they so kind? You are those people. So you can say that you may have wanted to do better, but you have that brand for sure, Jim, in all the positive ways that I could say it, you and your wife. And we've had on and off social interactions for, I don't know, 10 or 15, 20 years. I don't know. And Jim is that person. So whether you told your kids that as often as you'd like, maybe not, I don't know, but you showed them, which is more important, because authentically you are that person. And I think you know that. You wouldn't say it, but I know that but he acts it every single day.
Well, Cory, I appreciate that. There is nothing that brings more happiness into life than when you build relationships and they come through kindness. And fortunately, once again, in a lot of ways, my kids taught me to be kind, and it's who I want to be. And so I do appreciate that. Thank you.
So Jim, your kids have gotten a little bit older now and are getting married, and I'm scared about the whole giving my daughters away thing. So any advice to parents like me who have yet to come to that bridge?
Yeah, Cory, that's really interesting that you asked that question, because I'll be honest, I think I have a different perspective on that than most people. When my oldest daughter, Maddie, was getting married, everybody, and I mean everybody, my friends, other family members, anybody I talked to was like, "Oh, you're giving your first daughter away." And I said, "Oh my gosh, and isn't it the most incredible thing in the world?" And they're like, "What? Like, aren't you?" And I'm like, I have learned, and to the whole theme of this whole conversation, I wish I would have learned it earlier. Every time I see one of my children take that next step in life, it's the greatest moment I could experience as a father. If it be graduating from high school and taking that next step, if it graduating from college and whatever that next step, a job or marriage, or as I mentioned, that we have our first grandson, and that next step of deciding to have a family. And I should have, maybe there's something weird on my end, but I never once had that feeling like I'm losing my daughter. I was so excited for her to take that next step. That's all I cared about.
I think it'd be cool for the listeners to hear kind of the difference between, like, you were busy as a young father and you loved your kids with all your heart, but now with your grandson, how is that different?
Oh, it is a world of difference. I'm fortunate enough that we live close to my daughter and her husband, our grandson, Oliver, and my daughter helps my wife in her art business. And so she's over at the house with Oliver quite a bit. And when Oliver comes into the house, when Maddie brings him into the house, my whole world shuts down. All that matters is Oliver. He comes in and it is 100% bring Oliver over here, and he's all I'm even thinking about. And I compare that to when I was 24, 25, 26 years old and had a 1-year-old. I may be holding him. I may be giving him a bath. My mind was everywhere else. Oh, I got to do this at work. Oh, I didn't get this finished. I got to call this person. I got to do this. I got to shoot this email out. I never turned it off with my own kid. With Oliver, I've learned I just shut it off. And I wish I would have done it with my own kids.
I've got to remember to do that with my kids now. Just shut it off. Just be all in.
That's it.
Yeah. It's just that being present.
Totally.
It's a pretty good segue into the gentleman question. You want to ask the gentleman question, Cory?
Yeah, I can't believe we're so much time's gone by.
I know,
already.
it's gone by so fast.
So we finish the podcast every time with one question, and that is, what does it mean to you to be a gentleman?
I think we've touched on it a little bit in different ways throughout this conversation, but a true gentleman puts others first. And a true gentleman is more worried about how he can help others. Be aware enough of what someone is going through in their life. Because listen, we all look around and say, wow, that person, they've got everything going for them, but we all have challenges. We all have struggles. We all have things that keep us up at night. And a true gentleman is aware enough of those around him to know when they need a little extra love, a little extra kindness. We talked about kindness, a little extra help, and can put aside his own wants and needs to be there for someone else.
Thank you, Jim. It's been a very valuable conversation for me, and I hope the listeners got the value out of it that I did. If you're listening to the podcast and anything resonated with you today, just encourage you to take action on it. If it's something that Jim said and you thought, hey, I can identify with that, sit down and take an inventory of what you can do to be better, because definitely, the only thing in life that you're going to regret is not taking action on things that you should have. And so if something spoke to you today, go take action on it. And that's why Jim came in today, why we do the podcast, is to help the people that listen to the podcast. We selfishly get a lot out of it. Honestly, by the time we listen to it multiple times, Cory and I were talking today, it's like reading a book on fatherhood every week. and it's very, very beneficial for us as hosts, but we do this so that you can listen to this, share this message with the people that you love if you think that it can affect them and their lives to become better people and leave a legacy in their families that they'll be proud of. So thank you for joining us on the Gentleman Project podcast. Please like and follow the podcast on any social media platform that you follow. We're in all of them. You can download the podcast on any platform and, interact with us. If you've got some feedback, a topic that you'd like discussed, or any questions that you'd like to ask our guests from present or past, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. So thanks again for joining us. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore.
Talk to you next week.